Under the soft morning sunlight of Manhattan, a sleek black Cadillac Escalade quietly stopped in front of 917 Lexington Avenue. A woman stepped out, her Louboutin heels clicking against the polished granite. Dressed in a cream-colored suit, her long curly hair elegantly tied up, and her sharp gaze reminiscent of a financial magazine cover. Amara Rhodes, 42 years old, CEO of one of the leading private real estate investment firms on the East Coast. In the financial world, she needed no introduction, but today she wasn't here for a conference or a multi-million-dollar deal. She had a scheduled meeting 2 weeks prior with a potential legal partner, Thorne & Klein, LLP, a firm specializing in intellectual property and financial law. Ironically, their office was located in a building owned by her company. Amara pushed open the glass door and entered the lobby. The space was filled with the scent of unisex perfume and the soft clatter of keyboards from the reception desk. Dark walnut interiors, Italian leather sofas, and modern abstract paintings bathed in warm yellow light. At the reception, a young blonde woman named Tina, as indicated by her name tag, was engrossed in her phone while chewing gum. She looked up, her eyes briefly scanning Amara's cream suit, brown skin, and handcrafted Ghanaian leather bag. "Hello," Tina said, her voice flat and automatic. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, I'm Amara Rhodes. I have a 10 a.m. meeting with the managing attorney at Thorne & Klein," Amara replied, her voice deep and firm. Tina glanced at her computer, scrolled through a few lines, then shrugged. "Oh, they're in a meeting. You'll have to wait a bit." No apology, no offer of water, no friendly eye contact. Just a gesture toward the waiting area before she returned to her phone. Amara sat down silently, but inside, a cold silence was building. She was accustomed to such judgmental glances, at five-star restaurants when wearing jeans, at conferences where she was the only woman in the room, and now, in a building leased by her own company, the same look, the same judgment. But today, she didn't intend to remain silent. Sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, casting winding patterns around Amara's high heels on the cold stone floor. She sat upright on the luxurious leather chair, legs crossed, hands resting on her bag. Beyond her composed face, no one could tell she was silently counting each passing minute. 10:12 a.m. A white man entered, gray blazer, navy tie, shiny Italian leather shoes. As he stepped through the door, Tina stood up, her voice suddenly sweetened. "Mr. Rudd, you're right on time as always. Please proceed to room 14A. Attorney Klein is expecting you." No appointment check, no request to wait, no scrutinizing gaze. Amara watched, not with envy, but with quiet observation. 10:25 a.m. A stylish blonde woman entered, carrying a Birkin bag. Tina beamed. "Ms. Lancaster, still prefer pomegranate juice? I've prepared it for you." For her, juice. For me, indifference. Amara glanced around. No one else was waiting. The lobby was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner, the clatter of keyboards, and the silent ticking in her mind. 10:42 a.m. A middle-aged woman emerged from the elevator wearing a janitor's uniform. She glanced at Amara and nodded slightly. Amara nodded back, their eyes meeting briefly in a moment of shared understanding, as if both had waited long to be deemed important enough. 10:57 a.m. An hour had passed. No updates, no one asked, "Do you need anything?" Or, "Apologies for the wait." She picked up her phone and reopened the confirmation email from Thorne & Klein. The appointment, 10 a.m., May 17th. Signed by the senior attorney's assistant. She set the phone down and smirked. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a choice. Tina stepped out from behind the desk, carrying 2 lattes for a couple who had just arrived. Handing over the drinks, she asked, "Did you catch yesterday's press conference? Mr. Klein was impressive." Amara stood up. "No more waiting, not today." She adjusted her suit, picked up her bag, and walked toward the elevator. Tina looked up, surprised. Ma'am, where are you going? You can't go up without—" Amara paused before entering the elevator and turned back, her gaze sharp and calm. "I didn't come here seeking entry. I came to remind them who truly holds the power." The elevator doors closed slowly, reflecting the image of a woman no longer waiting, but rising to reclaim her rightful place. The elevator opened on the 7th floor, the executive suite of Thorne and Klein. Thick gray carpets muffled footsteps. Hallways lined with walnut panels emitted a subtle scent of fresh wood, and soft yellow lights cast warm glows on the ceiling, masking the underlying power dynamics. Amara walked slowly, unhurried, unafraid. She approached the office of Marcus Thorne, Regional Managing Director for the Americas. A small plaque on the door read, "No visitors without an appointment." She knocked twice. No response. She pushed the door open. Marcus Thorne looked up from his desk. A man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair neatly combed back, wearing a dark gray European-tailored suit. A Patek Philippe watch gleamed on his wrist. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice revealing surprise and irritation. Amara placed her bag on the chair opposite. Sat down, met his gaze. "Amara Rhodes, I had a 10 a.m. appointment with you. It's now 11:11 a.m. I've been waiting for 71 minutes. No need to raise her voice. Just the cold precision of time, the very tool power structures used to control others." Marcus froze for a moment, then frowned, flipping through his computer, his voice dry. Perhaps a mistake at the reception. "No, Mr. Thorne, it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice," Amara said, her voice eerily calm. He looked up, lips pressed together. "I'm not sure what you're implying." Amara tilted her head, her gaze piercing through his high-end suit. "Don't worry, I'll help you understand." She placed her phone on the table. The screen displayed a quiet recording. Tina's voice. "You can wait over there." Then, "Sorry, I'm not sure when he'll be available." Followed by, "Mr. Rudd, please go right in. Mr. Marcus is expecting you." Clinking glasses, laughter. The recording was brief, but as heavy as an indictment. "You're recording unauthorizedly in a private area." Marcus slammed the table, his lips trembling. "No," Amara replied. "That's the reception area. And I recorded evidence, not to target you, but to challenge the so-called normal habits here." Silence enveloped the room. And in that silence, Marcus realized the old game had just been overturned. He took a deep breath, trying to salvage the situation. "I apologize if you felt overlooked." Amara didn't blink. "This isn't about how I felt. It's about how you and this system operate, deciding who gets in, who waits, who's respected, and who's ignored. It's not written down, but it's evident in the glances, the tones, and the cold procedures." Marcus swallowed hard. His power slipped through his fingers like dry sand. And then the door opened. A deep voice resonated. "What's going on, Marcus?" Both turned. The global CEO of Thorne & Klein, Richard E. Walton, stood there, holding a briefcase, his eyes filled with suspicion. The next scene would not only change Amara's life, but also redefine how Thorne & Klein treated clients worldwide. Richard E. Walton, global CEO of Thorne & Klein, entered the room like a cold gust in the middle of summer. Crisp, composed, and commanding in a navy blue suit, his eyes sharp enough to scan a balance sheet with a single glance. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Amara, then locking onto Marcus Thorne, as if he'd just discovered a catastrophic error in a quarterly report. "What's going on, Marcus?" Marcus sprang to his feet, awkwardly adjusting his collar, voice stammering. "Just a minor misunderstanding with an appointment, Mr. Walton. I'm handling it." Amara remained seated, calm, steady. She turned slightly to face Richard. "It's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Walton. It's a lesson in how people like me are treated in this very building." Richard turned to her, and for the first time, his eyes truly stopped. Amara held his gaze. No need for an introduction. No explanation is necessary. She knew he would remember. And he did. Richard blinked. Recognition softened his expression, as though a long-lost memory had just clicked into place. "Amara Rhodes, CEO of Bravestone Analytics?" "Yes," she said coolly. "The woman who sat quietly in the ground-floor lobby for nearly 2 hours to witness how your company decides who gets invited into this room and who does not." The air in the room froze. Marcus turned pale. Richard stepped fully inside and placed his briefcase on the table, never taking his eyes off Marcus. "Do you know who is sitting here, Marcus?" Marcus said nothing. Richard looked back at Amara, his voice calm but weighty. "Miss Rhodes, I thought you were in Sao Paulo this week." "I rescheduled my flight to be here, to present a strategic partnership proposal between Bravestone and Thorne and Klein's Americas division." Richard nodded slightly, his eyes now simmering with restrained anger. "And instead of being welcomed as a partner, you were left waiting for 90 minutes? "No apology, not even a glass of water," Amara said directly. "Yet others who arrived after me, all with one thing in common, were ushered in as if they were the only ones worth listening to." Her voice did not tremble. She wasn't bitter. She spoke only the truth, and that made it undeniable. Richard tightened his grip on the briefcase handle. He turned, eyes piercing through Marcus. "Do you understand the consequences of this, Marcus?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came. No yelling, no accusations. Silence had already passed judgment. Richard turned back to Amara. "I can't change what happened this morning, but I can guarantee that from this moment forward, no one in this company, whether in New York, Tokyo, or Paris, will be allowed to treat a partner like that again." He extended his hand. "On behalf of Thorne and Klein, I apologize, Amara." Amara rose and shook his hand. Not as someone once overlooked, but as someone who just taught an entire institution how respect should look. Within minutes of that handshake between Amara and Richard, what had once been considered standard procedure began to crack, layer by layer. Richard turned to the 2 senior aides standing behind him, a tall Asian man in a gray suit, and a silver-haired woman with thin glasses, both members of Thorne and Klein's executive board. "Angela, pull the full visitor log for the last 48 hours at this branch. Oliver, I want a trace of all calls made from reception to Marcus's office." The instructions were brief, cold as steel. Angela and Oliver nodded silently and pulled out their phones. Within 30 seconds, the system began to move. Marcus stood frozen. Amara sat back down, but not on the edge of the chair this time. She sat centered at the boardroom table, like the key figure in the room. No need to posture, no need to yield. Richard pulled out a chair across from her and sat down. The rest of the team formed a semicircle around them. "Ms. Rhodes," he said, "before we discuss partnership terms, I want to hear exactly what you experienced this morning. Every detail." Amara nodded. She didn't need notes. Every memory was etched in her mind like a scar. She recounted how Melissa, the receptionist, had pointed vaguely at the seating area and then ignored her, treating her as though she were a walk-in or a job applicant, how the white men in tailored suits were welcomed by name and offered cold drinks, even though they arrived later. How Marcus walked through the lobby twice without acknowledging her, despite the meeting being confirmed a week in advance by Amara's assistant. How Melissa kept repeating, "Just wait a little longer," without ever checking the schedule. Richard didn't interrupt once. His face, once unreadable, shifted from cold to contemplative, then to quietly furious. The executives beside him took constant notes. When Amara finished, Richard stood up. He didn't look at her, not yet. He turned to Marcus. "You didn't just overlook a potential partner," he said. "You set a precedent for a culture that judges people based on bias and habit, not on their actual value." Marcus opened his mouth, this time desperate to defend himself. "Sir, it was a misunderstanding at the front desk. No," Richard cut in, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Melissa was your hire. You trained her. Every action she took this morning is a reflection of the culture you fostered. And that culture no longer fits Thorne and Klein." Silence. Angela then handed Richard a tablet. He skimmed it and nodded. "Marcus Thorne. Effective immediately. You are suspended indefinitely while we conduct a full investigation into this branch's client service standards and any discriminatory practices. Starting next week, every Thorne and Klein office will implement a fair reception policy, a new protocol that I'll be co-developing with Amara Rhodes." Marcus remained still. His eyes were bloodshot. Amara didn't look triumphant, only resolute. Because this wasn't about punishing someone. It was about correcting a long-standing pattern, a system that had ignored people like her for far too long. Richard turned back to her and extended his hand again. "We invited the wrong person to sit in the waiting room. Now, we invite you to sit at the decision table." 1 week after the incident that shook the West Point branch, the main auditorium at Thorne and Klein's Manhattan headquarters was packed. It was a rare internal summit attended by the entire senior leadership and over 200 staff from nationwide branches, live-streamed to more than 5,000 global employees. On stage, a large banner hung high. "Respect begins at the door." Beneath it, Richard Langford stepped forward into the spotlight, his face composed, his posture firm. "We've built one of the most trusted financial institutions in the world," he began. "But if that trust is built only on credit scores, appearances, or pedigree, then we haven't built anything. We've merely preserved a shell." He paused. "Last week, a client was left waiting for nearly 2 hours, not because of a lack of process, but because of an unnamed bias." A murmur spread across the back rows. She didn't shout, she didn't slam the table. She simply walked through a door we were deliberately keeping closed. He turned to the side and extended his hand. "Please welcome the person who will help us rewrite the way we welcome clients, the CEO of Rhodes Insight and Capital, Miss Amara Rhodes." At first, the applause was scattered, but as Amara stepped on stage, composed, grounded, her gaze unwavering, it built into a full, thunderous standing ovation. Speech. "Thank you, Mr. Langford, and thank you, everyone." Amara waited for the applause to settle. "Last week, I wasn't just kept waiting. I was looked through, as if I didn't exist. I don't blame one individual, I question an entire system. Because I know there are many others like me, people who will never get the chance to sit in a room like this, people without the CEO title, without the power to push back. We tell ourselves we're being professional, but professionalism does not mean indifference." She glanced at the front row, where Marcus used to sit, now empty. Modern discrimination doesn't scream anymore. It delays. It ignores. It comes dressed in polite indifference. Every sideways glance, every "just wait a moment," is how people are quietly pushed out of the doors of opportunity. But I'm not here for revenge, or even for a contract. I'm here because I believe if we're brave enough to look truth in the eye, then we are strong enough to change it. The auditorium fell silent, not out of shock, but because what she said was simply too true. Richard was the first to rise. Then the entire room followed. The applause wasn't just a formality, it was a release, a collective exhale, as if someone had finally said aloud what everyone had long known but never dared to confront. 3 months later, every Thorne and Klein branch implemented the new Fair Reception Protocol. Every client must be offered water, have their appointment confirmed, and be informed of their wait time, regardless of appearance or social status. Branch managers were now evaluated using a client fairness score, rated directly by clients after each visit. Melissa Stone resigned from the West Point branch, but not before writing a handwritten letter of apology that was shared internally. In it, she wrote, "I didn't realize how my glance could make someone feel small. Now, I do." Marcus Thorne was reassigned and no longer held a leadership position. However, he began attending internal seminars on unbiased leadership as part of a broader company reform initiative. Across the company, quiet shifts began to ripple. Receptionists stood when clients arrived, even if they didn't wear designer suits. Interns felt comfortable asking questions in boardroom meetings. Assistants no longer assume someone's importance based on their shoes. The banner from the headquarters event, "Respect begins at the door," was reproduced and installed at every Thorne and Klein location worldwide. In the HR training manual, right after the page on company values, was a new quote attributed to Amara Rhodes. "When someone walks through your door, they carry more than a name. They carry a story. Your job is not to judge it, but to see it." When Amara returned to the West Point branch, this time to speak at a conference on women of color in finance, the new receptionist stood up to greet her from across the lobby. A small bouquet had already been placed on the front desk. Tucked inside the bouquet was a handwritten note. "We once left you sitting outside. Now we stand when you walk in." The West Point team. Amara smiled. Not because she was being welcomed now, but, from now on, anyone who walked through that door would be. Some people walk into a room and change the entire atmosphere, not because they shout, not because they demand, but because they know when to stay silent and when to speak up, even when no one else dares to. If Amara's story made you pause and reflect on respect, fairness, and your place in this world, hit like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more true stories, where a single look, a quiet action, or one bold decision can shift an entire system. Because tomorrow, the one who needs to rise might just be you.